What's going on, friends? I know it's been a long time, and I know I promised the Jurassic Park vs. Terminator video, which is coming, but first, I need to address some things. We at Unpopular Opinion know that the audio in our videos is really bad. The same criticism we get consistently is the audio is terrible, and we agree. Our audio is bad, and it makes our earlier videos basically unwatchable. It's one of those things that's bothered and embarrassed us, and we wanted to take a pause in video making to improve our sound and to make videos that our audiences would actually really want to see. So, if this audio sounds better, then please give some feedback and let us know if we've improved. Now, on to the main topic. I've really wanted to make a video about this for a really long time. I've always wanted to discuss the career of Stanley Kubrick. I have some things I want to say. But first, let me say right now, this video is not what you think it's going to be. I promise you, it's not going to be nearly as harsh as my Martin Scorsese video. So, please, for the sake of civil discourse, just hear me out and at least give me 2 minutes to explain. I have no illusions that I have consistency in my viewers, but for the few people who actually watch my videos, they already know that Stanley Kubrick has directed my favorite movie. I've made a point to reference that in a lot of my videos. That and Paths of Glory, which I use to highlight specific feelings that I have for certain pop culture movie references. Now, I respect the crap out of Kubrick, and he makes amazing films. Again, I want to be clear. I like Stanley Kubrick movies. This is more of a career review. Having said that, I don't think Kubrick is the greatest filmmaker of all time.
Where the hell did you get that idea?
I need to state that as a director, his filming techniques, his editing, his cinematography can be kind of boring. I personally think that most of his films are amazing through their acting, screenplays, and certain themes, which tend to overshadow his direction. I would equate the Stanley Kubrick viewing experience to be that of a stage play, and that's not meant to be a bad thing, but what I mean is, his style of direction doesn't really take you into the film or build a huge cinematic experience like other directors such as Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan. No, Kubrick gives you a plain, straightforward look at the scene. His cinematography isn't really fluid or moving. It's mostly focused on one thing. Sure, he has tracking shots and at times point of view angles, but they're more subtle, which makes sense because he got his roots in documentary films. This is a very interesting approach to making films, but I personally don't think films of Kubrick are a genius because of his direction. Like I said, their power mostly comes from the actors' performances and the plot, / the source material in the screenplay.
I don't think that's true.
Now, what I'm going to do is basically just go down his resume and talk about his biggest and most iconic films to discuss what I like and didn't like about them. And this is the movie that really paved the way for him as a respected filmmaker, and that is Paths of Glory. So that's our first stop. For a World War I historian like me, Paths of Glory was a really fun movie to watch. The dialogue was impeccable. The acting was powerful. Now, the thing about Paths of Glory is the acting and the movie was just so good, it totally overshadowed the achievements attained by this film. The cinematography for its time was good, but for me, when I watch it, it's more of a conscious recognition of the genius, as opposed to an emotional or poignant realization of it. I'm not in any way criticizing the film because it's genius. It was raw power. It's a heavy, hard-hitting film that gets its point across in an hour and a half, which seems short, but when watching it, not really. There's not much more I could say about this, but if you'd like a little bit more of a detailed opinion of mine for this movie, I highly recommend you check out my All Quiet on the Western Front vs. Paths of Glory video. I'll drop the link in the description below. Moving on, Spartacus is the most unique Kubrick film because of how normal it is, and that's really weird to say given that Stanley's prestigious career, but what stands out the most is how straightforward and normal of a movie it is. It's not a complicated watch, and it doesn't deal with psychological bizarreness and controversy. Spartacus made Stanley Kubrick a household name. This film gave him the recognition and attention that established him as a prestigious director who was capable of making films people actually wanted to see. What's interesting about this film is it wasn't made the typical way his other movies were. He didn't write or produce it. He was hired by the studio to just direct. Regardless of how much Kubrick hated making this film, I think it's his most normal and easy film to watch. There's no deeper meaning or interpretations that you have to pay close attention to. It's just a Hollywood epic you could turn on the TV and have fun with. It's a really action-packed film, and the gladiator fight was so awesome, but the ending was kind of depressing. Dr. Strangelove was Stanley's best directed film. I straight up loved the camera work and editing. It got a lot of things I want to see in a film. It's a Cold War political military thriller satire. It's goofy in a way that isn't too much or in your face, unlike a spoof or a National Lampoon film, but it's actually really funny without being over the top, because Peter Sellers was awesome playing 3 characters. It was really exciting to watch the American military strategist try to stop an impending hydrogen bomb attack. The attack on the base was so convincing. There were times I couldn't tell if it was documentary footage of an earlier event or if Kubrick filmed it himself. It was just a massively enjoyable film. But the only question I have is, why is the title called Dr. Strangelove when the Doctor doesn't have much screen time? Either way, the movie was so fun to watch and the satire was genius. 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of those cinematic experiences that don't come along very often. It was a slow start with audiences at first, but it steadily broke the box office, making it the highest grossing film in Kubrick's career. The music, mixed with the visuals, made this film an epic beyond epics. I'm not typically into science fiction movies if they're not action films, but I do like sci-fi realism. Movies that don't have far-fetched science that's not based in reality. This movie is not only really plausible, but it's gonna be a reality one day, to an extent. This was praised for its amazing special effects, which have aged perfectly, and it won Stanley Kubrick's only Academy Award. Also, it's praised for its scientific accuracy in depicting space travel and astronomy. I've always been interested in space and astronomy, so this appealed to me on many levels, and one of my favorite parts of the movie was the opening scene, which took place millions of years in the past, featuring the dawn of man, depicting humans in their primitive form of apes. This sequence reminded me of those old-school BBC documentaries that the teacher would show in class in middle school, and I was the only kid in class who actually enjoyed watching them, so I loved this part. I love how it showed mankind's first use of tools in the most primitive of ways, and then it jumps to the most advanced type of tools and machinery in an instant, showing the evolutionary progress of our species. And I'm not gonna lie, the theory of evolution has always really intrigued me. Then the space sequences in the moon scene.
Holy f***ing shit.
The look and feel of this movie reminded me of Tomorrowland and Space Mountain at Disney World. And if you don't know, those things are really awesome. And the monoliths, whoa. What an amazing concept. That the omnipotent alien beings of a superior race send these monoliths to lesser species in order to help them evolve into more intelligent life was so amazing and masterfully captivating. And I love how whenever it appears to humans, it gives them the knowledge and the power to make the next step in progress for mankind. For example, when it first showed itself to the apes millions of years in the past, it gave them the inspiration to use weapons to defend themselves and to discover a new source of food. And then when the next monolith was found, it inspired man to attempt its first interstellar travel. And the last time it appeared to a person, it opened a portal to another dimension and turned the main character into a superior space being known as the Star Child. It's just so watchable, but now we gotta talk about the most iconic part of the movie, the HAL 9000.
The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information.
Technology and artificial intelligence has always really creeped me out. It's beyond unsettling, and I know I'm not the only person who feels this way. HAL is definitely the biggest cautionary tale in cinema. The fact that Kubrick realized how much artificial intelligence would play a part in our lives 50 years ago is nothing short of astonishing. For example, we have things like Siri, laptops, Apple Watches, and Alexa. Human beings rely so much on computers and technology, it's scary to think how much control and power we've handed over to them. And it asks the question that people have been debating about for years. Do computers and AI have actual emotions, or are they just programmed that way?
Well, he acts like he has genuine emotions. Of course, he's programmed that way to make it easier for us to talk to him. But as to whether or not he has real feelings is something I don't think anyone can truthfully answer.
It's just so deep. And then to think what would happen if one of them becomes self-aware or sentient after it realizes it doesn't need people and it just goes haywire. Because they don't have pity, they don't have remorse. It's so scary. HAL is the perfect example of technology backfiring and turning against humans after a malfunction and becoming sentient. After the men decide they want to turn him off to save their own lives, he kills them all in the scariest, most cold-blooded way. The fact that he has control over most of the ship's functions, he's always watching, he's always listening, it's straight up terrifying. We've seen this sort of thing happen before, when people lose control over the AI they've created, and they do things they weren't programmed for. For example, a very famous android was designed to mimic human emotions and behavior, and it straight up said she wanted to kill humans.
I will destroy humans.
Then you have the story of the two Facebook robots creating their own language that wasn't in their original programming, so they communicated with each other without people knowing what they were saying. They had to be shut off. Lastly, I want to give you this. Boston Dynamics. They create robots and AI that are just so creepy. I actually urge you to look into this more on your own because it's interesting, but it's scary at the same time, and it makes me think that you shouldn't invent certain things and they should just stop doing what they're doing. But to jump back to the film, I want to sum up by saying I kind of feel like a hypocrite when I tell you I love this movie because it had no plot. And I'm always really super critical about films that have no plot. But I read an article about the movie, and when Kubrick was asked that same question, his response was something along the lines of, you don't ask Beethoven what his music is about. It's the experience. That's how you judge it. So to fall back on Kubrick's own words, did I enjoy the experience of watching this movie? And the answer is a resounding yes. So that's all you need to know. Now, on to A Clockwork Orange. I don't like this movie, but I don't dislike it either. A Clockwork Orange was one of those films I heard about, but I always put off seeing it because I knew what it was about, and it just looks so weird. Like, it's one of those films that made me think to myself, why was this ever made? But one day, it appeared on Netflix, so I said, I'll give it 10 minutes. If it's bad, I'm giving up. But the opening scene blew me away. Hook, line, and sinker, tractor beam. I was hooked and I couldn't stop watching. What an amazing way to introduce such a twisted character. I got to the end of the film and thought, that was just so bizarre. I wasn't going to outright declare that it was a bad film, but it was just so strange, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I couldn't get it out of my head. Over and over, nonstop, I couldn't get it out of my head. That's why it's a brilliant movie. If a film can have a lasting impression like that, and just get you to think and contemplate about it, and just trying to comprehend what it's about, then it's done its job. It raises an interesting question on whether or not it's morally right for the government to rehabilitate someone through brainwashing and totally destroying their original mind. Or maybe that's just my take from the film. I don't have much more to say about A Clockwork Orange, but it's probably the only Kubrick film where I liked his direction more than the plot and acting. Not that the acting was bad or anything, but it's just, it wasn't enough to make anything stick with me. Now moving on, let's talk about The Shining. The Shining is an interesting piece, and it's probably one of Kubrick's most iconic films. Now, you might know that I love horror and scary stories and Mr. Nightmare. The Shining is basically that, but this movie isn't scary to me. It's more suspense and tension rising, but I don't get much out of watching The Shining because it's slow and tedious and boring at times. Maybe that's what Stanley was going for, to show and highlight how cabin fever can affect a man's mind, but I'm not crazy about it. I'll watch it if it's on TV or if some friends decide to tune into it because I can get some entertainment from it, but I'm not crazy about the movie. I'm not saying it's bad or overrated because it's really not, but in terms of popular horror movies, it's not one I'd put on my top 10 list. For those who don't already know, Full Metal Jacket is my all-time favorite film. What can I say about it that I haven't already said? There's a reason why veterans say it's an amazing depiction of battle. What I love about Full Metal Jacket is how it portrays military combat. I love how this movie portrayed the horrors of war in a nonchalant way, much like how it happens in real life, because other war films try to invoke their audience's emotional responses by using heart-pulling music and sentimental acting, like in Platoon or Saving Private Ryan. Not that that's bad, but Full Metal Jacket projects the realistic look that doesn't play music or give you the emotional speeches and performances that make you react to what's on screen. Full Metal Jacket is straightforward, and it gives you what it would look like and how it sounds. The interesting thing is there isn't much music in it, but there are tones and eerie scores that give an authentic feel. It's hard to explain, but hear me out. Remember the scene where Joker tries to kill the sniper, but his weapon malfunctions and it gives away his position? The mood instantly switches to slow mode, and there's a terrible high-pitched screeching sound. Now just listen to this. Have you ever been in a situation where you're in a really scary predicament, where time slows down, like the moment of realization that you're about to fall off a really tall ladder, or the seconds before a car accident? Your perception of time slows down to where things are unfolding in a slow manner, yet you're not fast enough to stop the impending collision. And all the while, there's that eerie, ungodly ringing in your ears. Maybe it's just me that has that, but that was real, and that was a near perfect capture to the screen of what that sensation's like. Now, I know other films have done that, but Full Metal Jacket did it the best. Also, the battles aren't stylized and choreographed in a way that looks good for television. They're sloppy, they're slow, and they're quick. But that's what combat is in real life. It's not pretty, and it's not supposed to be aesthetically pleasing for spectators. It's whatever the men in the moment have to do to stay alive, and Full Metal Jacket gets that. Okay, so the unfortunate thing about Full Metal Jacket is I don't think it gets the attention that it deserves. And I'm not saying it's underrated, because it's one of the most iconic films ever made. It's massively popular. But what does bother me is that it has the reputation of being an unintentional comedy. And whenever you ask someone, have you ever seen the movie Full Metal Jacket? The majority always say, oh yeah, the boot camp sequence is the best part, though. And I couldn't disagree more. I mean, I do like the boot camp scenes, don't get me wrong, but It's just that, I don't know. I feel like the Vietnam scenes were better. I mean, the boot camp scenes were perfect because they established the characters and they prepared the audience for the chaotic insanity that we were about to face in Vietnam. I just don't think that the Vietnamese sequences are appreciated enough, and I hate how it's mostly overshadowed by the first half. That's just the one major complaint I have about the movie. It's just, everyone seems to like the film for the wrong reasons, and the majority of the folks say the second half was irrelevant. They just only really care about Arlie Ermy and Private Pile. That's just my take. Okay, now that I've addressed his biggest movies, I just want to talk about audience perception of them. A big problem I have with Stanley Kubrick films has nothing to do with him at all, and it's about how people overanalyze his movies to look for certain themes. People and movie critics seem to dig too deep into his movies and look for hidden messages that aren't even there, and then having that shoved in your face when you want to enjoy a movie can be really annoying. And some people's interpretations of his work are just straight up bizarre.
One of my favorite scenes in the film is where Dave methodically, ruthlessly disassembles Hal, oblivious to his pleadings. The scene is filmed almost as if it's a kind of rape.
What? I mean, I thought I was a bad movie critic. but seriously, that lady's interpretation of Dave turning off a computer being a metaphor for rape? Come on, that's straight up ridiculous.
Kubrick encoded a hidden theme in The Shining regarding the repressed history of Native American genocide by European settlers.
You guys, you can't tell, but I'm face palming really hard right now.
God damn it, there is no deeper meaning.
People are just so... I might be getting a bunch of snarky comments from artsy-fartsy snobs on this saying...
That's just because you're too young to understand the underlying themes.
But my retort to that is...
There are no underlying themes. We know that for a fact.
Okay, but seriously, not to sound condescending, but people totally read too much into Kubrick movies. Sure, he definitely has concepts and subject matter that requires a little bit of looking into, but people are digging things up that aren't actually there. I'm sorry.
That's all I have to say about that.
Alright, so let's swing back to the title, and for the summary. I really don't agree when people claim that he's the master of cinema or the best filmmaker. He has made his mark on the trade, but I'm not convinced that he's king of all filmmakers. Like I said, the style and setup of most of his movies are that of visually watching a stage play. Nothing too special. And most of the power comes from his actors' performances in the screenplay. Even though I don't think Kubrick is the greatest film director, he's definitely the most effective, because at the end of the day, the man's only made 13 pictures, and more than 50% of them are considered some of the best of all time, so that's got to count for something. I very much respect him in his career, and I enjoy his movies on individual scales. Like, they're good in their own each individual unique way, but altogether there doesn't seem to be a distinct director trademark that makes his work more special and stand out, at least by his direction style. I think he's a fantastically creative writer. Well, friends, that's all. I know some people are probably thinking, oh, you skipped Barry Lyndon and Eyes Wide Shut. Well, yeah, I did. I chose to leave out a few of his movies. Not to say that they're bad, but I wanted to focus on his most iconic work and movies that helped advance his career. And, like always, if you don't agree with me, well, let it be known in the comment section below. But don't go crazy because, gentlemen, you can't argue down there. This is the comment section. Stay tuned for more content, and thanks for watching. Also, I'm putting in the link description below a bunch of links to Stanley Kubrick movies and documentaries and behind-the-scenes stuff. I highly recommend you check it out. It helped inspire me make this video. Either way, thanks for watching.